She screamed from across the fence, "You can't block the creek, it belongs to the HOA, but that creek ran through my land." That day, I stood in mud up to my boots, staring at the small dam I'd built with my own hands. It wasn't big, just a private water reserve for my crops. But Karen, the HOA president, acted like I had stolen her backyard. She came marching with her clipboard, phone out, recording every inch of my property. "This is a violation of Section 14A, she shouted, waving a paper she printed off the internet. I asked her calmly, "You even read that section?" She blinked, hesitated, then snapped, "You'll be hearing from the HOA attorney." 2 days later, a bright red notice appeared on my front door. HOA fine, $250,000 for unauthorized water construction. My wife almost fainted. I laughed, thinking it was some joke. But then came the certified letter, real as daylight. They were serious. Karen even posted about it on the community app, calling me a reckless landowner putting everyone at risk. I didn't reply. I just saved every post, every message. The neighbors started whispering. Some stopped waving. One evening, I found a group of them standing near the dam, pointing at it like it was a crime scene. Karen was in the middle, talking loud, pretending to inspect. She said something about structural failure and flood danger. That's when I knew she was trying to make me the villain. But what she didn't know was that the land records were about to turn her entire story upside down. "Let them find me," I told my wife that night. "Sometimes, when people push too far, you just let nature push back." And when the first heavy rain hit 3 weeks later, nature did exactly that. The storm rolled in faster than anyone expected. By nightfall, thunder cracked over the valley like cannon fire, and the creek turned into a raging stream. I stood under my porch light, rain hammering the tin roof, watching the water rise behind my small dam, calm, steady, controlled. It was doing exactly what I designed it to do. Across the street, Karen was pacing on her lawn, yelling at someone over the phone. Even from that distance, I could hear her voice cutting through the rain. "He's flooding the neighborhood. Get the sheriff out here now." Her husband was trying to pull her inside, but she kept pointing at my property like it was a monster about to attack. 15 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up, sirens blaring. One deputy ran toward me, yelling over the storm, "Sir, we got reports of you obstructing natural water flow." I just handed him a folder I had been keeping for weeks, land ownership maps, state permits, and soil test reports. He flipped through them under the flashlight, water dripping off his hat. Then he looked back at Karen, who was still shouting from her driveway, "That dam is illegal. It's endangering us all." The deputy sighed and said, "Ma'am, according to this, the creek line stops 30 feet before his fence. He's within his rights." Karen froze, her mouth half open. But she wasn't done. "He must have faked those papers," she barked. "I want the HOA board here right now." The deputy turned to me quietly and said, "Sir, I'd suggest you take a video of everything tonight. Just in case." I did exactly that. I filmed the rain, the dam, the rising water, and the woman across the street losing her mind in front of half the neighborhood. By midnight, the storm turned violent. Lightning flashed, and I saw something that made my heart stop. The drainage system behind Karen's property was completely blocked with HOA construction debris. They had rerouted the stormwater months ago for a landscape project. I whispered under my breath, "Oh, Karen, you built your own flood." The next crack of thunder was louder, closer, and then came the sound, a deep, low roar that no one could mistake. The roar grew until it felt like the ground itself was shaking. I grabbed my flashlight and ran toward the fence. The water had found a new path, not through my dam, but straight toward the HOA's prized cul-de-sac. The same one where Karen hosted her wine nights and exclusive member meetings. Karen was still outside, clutching her phone, when the first wave of muddy water swept across her driveway. "Oh my God, the street's flooding," she screamed, running toward her garage. Her husband tried to lift sandbags, but it was useless. The water was pouring in faster than they could react. The dam hadn't broken, the HOA's storm barrier had. Within minutes, 3 other houses were knee-deep underwater. Porch lights flickered, alarms went off, and cars started floating. The neighbors who once sided with Karen now stood helpless, watching everything they owned sink. I stood behind my fence, still filming, silent. My dam stood firm, not a single crack. Karen saw me through the storm, rage and panic mixing on her face. "You did this," she shouted. "You caused this flood." I didn't answer. I just raised my phone slightly so she could see the red recording light. The next morning, the rain stopped. The entire HOA street looked like a disaster zone. Reporters showed up before sunrise. Drones hovered overhead. Karen was standing outside her flooded home in a robe, yelling at the news crew to film his illegal dam. But the cameraman wasn't interested in her yelling. He was pointing the lens toward the damaged HOA drainage pipes and the piles of construction debris stacked right behind her property line. When the county inspector arrived, he took one look and frowned. "Who approved this reroute?" he asked. Karen stammered. "It was the HOA project. For water beautification." The inspector's tone went cold. "You diverted a storm channel without county permission." The silence that followed was heavy, except for the sound of water still dripping from her mailbox. I stepped forward then, calm and quiet, and said, "She fined me $250,000 for protecting my land, and now nature just charged her the same." Her eyes widened. The cameras caught every second. By noon, the neighborhood was crawling with officials, county engineers, insurance agents, and a few stunned HOA members who couldn't believe what they were seeing. The once perfect lawns were buried under brown water, and the community's "no trespassing" signs floated like little flags of defeat. Karen tried to hold a meeting right there on the street, shouting orders through a megaphone. "No one talks to the media until we fix this," she yelled, standing in ankle-deep water. But her voice trembled when one of the county officers approached her with a clipboard. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "we're issuing an emergency notice of violation. You and your board will need to appear before the county drainage committee. There's evidence of unauthorized construction here." Karen's hand shook as she took the paper. "This can't be happening. He's the one who built the dam," she said, pointing at me again. The officer looked over and nodded respectfully. "We already reviewed his permit, ma'am. His structure prevented further flooding. You might want to thank him." That line hit her like a punch. She looked around, realizing the neighbors were all watching. Some were filming. One woman muttered, "Guess all those HOA meetings didn't stop Mother Nature." Karen tried to save face, wiping her eyes and shouting, "This isn't over." But her voice broke mid-sentence. I didn't respond. I just walked back to my porch, where my wife was standing with a blanket and a cup of coffee. She whispered, "You're not gonna post that footage, are you?" I looked at my phone, watching Karen screaming in front of the cameras, and said softly, "No, I'll let the truth post itself." Later that day, a county truck parked outside. Two men began pulling the HOA construction files from their office. Apparently, Karen had signed off every reroute under her own name. Fraud, negligence, misuse of funds. Words started floating around like storm clouds all over again. But I stayed quiet. I'd already done my part. That night, as I sat by the window, lightning flashed once more, and in the reflection, I saw Karen's car headlights stop by my driveway. She stepped out, soaked and shivering, holding something in her hand. A letter. She stood there for a moment, rain sliding off her hair, eyes red from crying. For the first time since this whole mess began, Karen didn't look like the queen of the neighborhood. She looked scared. I opened the door slowly, half expecting another round of shouting, but she just held out the letter with trembling hands. "This is from the HOA board," she said quietly. "They voted to remove me. Effective immediately." Her voice cracked on the last word. "They said I embarrassed the association." I took the letter without a word. She looked around at the dark, muddy street, the same place she once strutted like she owned every inch of it. "Everything's ruined," she whispered. "The insurance won't even cover the damage because it was an unapproved alteration." For a second, I saw her pride break completely. Then, almost like a confession, she said, "I didn't mean for this to happen. I just thought keeping control would keep things perfect." I folded the letter and said, "Control isn't ownership, Karen. You learn that when you stop trying to own people." She turned to leave, but then stopped. "You could ruin me with that video," she said, her voice small. "You have every right to." I looked at her for a long moment. I don't need to ruin you, I said quietly. You already taught everyone what power really looks like, and it wasn't you. She swallowed hard, nodded once, and walked away into the rain, her shoes sinking in the mud she once fined others for. The next morning, my video, without me uploading it, went viral. One of the reporters had caught the entire scene on camera. The clip was titled, "HOA President Causes Flood While Fining Neighbor for a Dam." Millions watched. The comments were brutal. Karen's face was everywhere. News stations replayed her yelling. Then the moment she realized her own drainage reroute caused the flood. But I didn't smile. I just watched quietly, sipping my coffee, as justice played out in ways I didn't even have to control. A week later, the sun finally broke through, and the smell of wet soil filled the air. Cleanup crews came and went, and for the first time in years, the neighborhood was silent. No HOA meetings, no passive-aggressive letters, no threats about community standards. Just quiet. Karen's house was still half empty, furniture stacked by the curb, for sale, sign leaning against the mailbox. Word around town was that she was moving in with her sister up north, starting over. Nobody stopped her. Nobody waved goodbye. I spent that afternoon at the dam, checking the structure. It held strong, solid, steady, like a reminder that patience is stronger than pride. My wife joined me, resting her hand on my shoulder. "You could have taken her to court," she said softly. "You had every reason." I nodded. "Yeah, but sometimes the best revenge is just letting the truth breathe." We stood there watching the calm water glisten under the sun. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. It was a message from the county commissioner. "Greater than, we reviewed your dam plans. Excellent work. We'd like your help designing a flood prevention project for other rural properties." I smiled. The same thing that got me fined had now turned into something good for everyone else. That evening, I took one last walk through the neighborhood. The same neighbors who once avoided eye contact now stopped to thank me. One man said, "You saved our side of the street." Another woman added, "Guess the HOA messed with the wrong guy." I just laughed and replied, "No one wins against nature, or the truth." As the sun dipped behind the trees, I looked back at the dam one last time and whispered to myself, "Greater than." They tried to drown me in fines, and ended up drowning in their own lies. Justice didn't come with handcuffs or revenge. It came with balance, the kind you can't fake or fine away. And for the first time in a long time, peace felt like mine again. Subscribe my YouTube channel for more stories.